Hello, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to The Local Lens, a podcast from the Powell County Health Department where we go inside our community's experience with the drug epidemic. On this week's episode, we are joined by Mr. Billy Rice, who is a detective of our local police department. So the whole goal of this show is to share different people's experiences and perspectives so that we can learn how to better see the whole drug crisis that our community faces. So Billy offers us an incredible perspective on this topic because of both his personal life and his professional role. He grew up as a person whose both parents were in addiction, but he grew up avoiding ever getting addicted to anything and ended up actually working in law enforcement, which, just what a storyline. That's such an incredible storyline. So Billy is also a guy, he's the first Powell County High School quarterback that I remember watching as a young kid play. So I always looked up to him personally. And then seeing him go into this public service, I really respect this guy. But anyways, I'm your host, Nate Brooks. This is The Local Lens, coming to you from Stanton, Kentucky at the foothills of Appalachia. The show is a Powell County Cares project from the Powell County Health Department with help from Kentucky Rio. These are our people using our voices, telling our stories, because no one sees it like we do. And just one more quick note before we get started. We had to record this episode in the police department, so there's a little bit of background noise. So you're here from Powell County.
Born and raised.
Born and raised, there we go. What is the crisis like here? How would you describe it?
We definitely have a problem, like many other small communities out there. There's a lot of poverty, and just about, which I have the privilege now that I investigate a lot of crimes as a detective, and just about a very high percentage of them. I don't have any data with me today, but just going off recollection, a very high percentage of them are linked back to some form of drug addiction. It's we don't see as many career criminals around here. We see people that unfortunately are addicted to drugs, opiates, methamphetamine, and they're committing crimes to be successful in obtaining drugs. Most of the time, not every time, but most of the time, when somebody steals your weed eater, they're not stealing it to pay their water bill. They're stealing it to buy their next batch of drugs. So we definitely have a problem here.
That would probably be your all's biggest connection at the police department. Your biggest connection to the problem then is just like how much crime it's driving in this community. Would you say that, or?
Yeah. Now, as far as crime, we don't have a lot. We have our fair share. Pretty average for the community. But as far as what we do have, yes, I can confidently sit here and say that most of it is drug driven, if that's a thing. I may have made that term up, but it's driven by the usage of drugs and the ability that people don't have the means to get the drugs, so they resort to crime to get it.
What is your direct connection to it? Would you say the strongest connection is being a detective, or?
That's a connection, but there's also a connection from my childhood. I grew up with both parents addicted to drugs. I've lived with aunt and uncles and grandparents growing up. So it happens to everybody. It's in every family, but you can't overcome it. Just because your parents are using doesn't mean you have to. That's one thing that I experienced it. So when I walk in these places and I see that 7-8-year-old boy or girl sitting there, and and I know their parents are somewhat drug addicts. I've been there, done that, and I like to tell these people that just because your family has a legacy of doing it, you don't have to. You don't have to. You can overcome it and be above it. And everybody, that's the great thing about America, is everybody has an opportunity to do well for themselves. And just because your family, now I'm not saying it's not going to be easy, it's going to be difficult, but if you can just fight that urge to pick it up to begin with, prevention, don't ever even, I know you all deal with a lot of people that are already addicted, trying to save lives and try to rehab them to where they stop. But I'm a big believer in the prevention aspect of it, and I don't have any data on it, and you might be able to answer this, but I feel like prevention would probably be cheaper than rehab and stuff, Narcan, different things, and I think you save more lives that way. You're not physically saving the lives. You're not Narcanning them and saving them physically, but you're saving lives if they never do it. So I'm a big advocate of prevention. I'd like to see our school system, do a little bit. I ain't saying that they're not doing anything. Don't take us the wrong way, but we're the school resource officers for the school system now. The Stanton Police has the contract, and we've been in and out of the schools. And I would like to, and some of that's on our end. I like to see us get together and work with the school, get more education out there, and expose these kids to the dangers of it and different things. I think when I was growing up, and I don't know if they still had it when you was there, but they did have it. They had a DARE program. Maybe the school and the police department can work together, but I guess most of that comes down to fundings. I mean, it's not, you have to, find that funding somewhere, but I think it's very important that the youth and prevention, that's real important to me, because I've experienced it as a child, as far as parents being addicted.
So growing up, one of my best friends was actually the son of the two people who ended up doing a lot to help raise Billy. And that was his Uncle Gary and Aunt Joe.
Uncle Gary and Aunt Joe, they did me a tremendous favor. They took me in while I was experiencing, both parents using drugs, struggling with addiction, and helped me get through high school and stuff, and set me on a good path to being successful in life.
Yeah.
So and let me say that's another thing. If you just heard what I just said, I had an aunt and uncle that graciously took me in, and I know it cost them money and probably some heartache and stuff when I may not have rode in a curfew and stuff like that on time every now and then. I was a pretty good kid though.
Yeah.
But if you you see these kids in your families, if you're an aunt or an uncle to a kid and you have a brother or sister struggling, I mean, reach out there and get those kids out of that situation. You never know. I'm the prodigy of a situation like that, so I know it could be kind of a burden financially, stuff like that, but get them and see if you can help them be successful. They have a better chance than they do staying. Yeah. So if you speak up and try to get them out of that situation if you can, because I don't have any data of that, but I can only imagine from what I see is you're more likely to use drugs if you grow up around it, especially if you get parents that don't care what you do and aren't keeping up, because they're struggling with addiction, and they generally they're not the parent they need to be. We all know that, but that's another thing I'd like to put out there.
Me and my brothers have always talked about like what the involvement of sports has to do in kids in their lives, and we've always said that just like when you have something that like you can really strive for, like work after, you can like kind of make it your own thing, and like it obviously doesn't have to be sports, but any kind of thing you can get into like as a young kid and like really kind of put your time into that.
Anything that you can get involved in, and sports, any type of clubs, activity. The more you have to lose, in my opinion, the less likely you are to stray off and do drugs. Like you mentioned earlier, I played high school football. I loved it. It was my life back then, and I owe a lot to Coach Mike Whitaker. He was a great role model. Always kept us interested. Kept it fun, kept us interested. Ran a good program there for years at Powell County, and that's another reason why I had too much to lose. I mean, I'm not going to go, smoke a marijuana joint or have the temptation to use drugs or anything of that nature. As I had too much to lose.
Mm-hmm.
So you get involved in stuff, and you know, the more active you are in sports, or you know, some type of club, or you know, just your general intentions in life to be something or do good, and you know, drugs, you know, addiction could quickly and very easily hinder that and mess it up. So
Mm-hmm.
so
So I can kind of change in directions then.
go ahead.
Back to more of your role in the police department. Is there a specific story that's happened like in the PD with your service here that that's kind of changed your view that like on the whole problem that made you realize something that you were maybe looking at differently before?
I can't think of one specific event, but the events that always bother me is death associated with the drug. It's real, and we're there. You know, get a front seat ticket to it. Sometimes the first one's there. I've discovered people, you know, deceased with a syringe still in their arm, and that's a pretty hard pill to swallow, because you know that's what killed them. And you know, if they didn't, you know, have a drug addiction, they could be with us today. So, especially back, you know, when I was a young deputy, you know, I started off as a deputy sheriff, and when I was a young deputy, just, you know, 21, 22 years old out here, you know, a police officer, and seeing some of this stuff that that I didn't even know, you know, how the world really turned, and it definitely opened my eyes up. And if I can share it with people, I would just like to tell them that it's real. I mean, you know, you can, you know, if you use drugs, or you know, shoot any type of drug that has, you know, fentanyl in it, stuff like that, there's a chance that, you know, you could die. I mean, it's real. I've seen it, unfortunately, more times than I'd like to. So, and it's real. Most people only see stats and numbers. I've seen it in person. So it's real.
Yeah.
So
I know one thing that keeps I know you've hit on like fentanyl before with me, and one thing that's always just surprised me is just like how deadly that is, and like how just kind of unexpected it can be at times too. Just like if I've heard of bad batches coming through and like sending like overdose numbers like through.
And I'll hit on that. And you know, the I guess the drug trafficking industry is its own little world. You know, it's competitive, and you know, sometimes it's intentional. You know, these dealers will, you know, increase the amount of fentanyl in their drugs, and if, you know, they can kill a couple people or overdose a couple people, all of a sudden they have the best stuff there. You know, it's you know, simple economics, believe it or not, it's involved in the drug trafficking world. So, you know, sometimes it's intentional. They bump it up, and you know, I've seen it called, you know, they say, you know, so and so has the fire. You know, I had to use two. You know, just recently, I won't go into the details of the investigation, but you know, I was reading some messages on a phone related to an investigation, and you know, they're talking about, you know, where to get the stuff at that overdosed so and so. Had to have, you know, Narcan. That's the stuff that they wanted. So sometimes it's intentional, but you never know what you're getting. I mean, unless you're sitting there making. I mean, you know, these drug dealers and drug traffickers, I mean, they might not even know what they have. So I mean, it's you're playing Russian roulette every time that they stick that needle in their arms. You never know, and it's quick. You know, it attacks your respiratory system, and it's quick. And you know, especially if you're alone. I mean, you know, nowadays I would, you know, if you was going to use, I think you'd be crazy to use alone, because it's just so quick.
And this is actually something that health departments around the world are starting to encourage people. Not telling people to use drugs, but telling people that if you are going to use drugs, then please don't do it on your own. Please have somebody there so that if something goes wrong, then they could help you out. So here at the Powell County Health Department, we tell people that through the syringe exchange program, which, if you're unfamiliar with that, that's a program where people can bring in dirty needles in exchange for clean syringes. So this is a way to help reduce the spread of disease when people are using drugs. So we're about to get into this topic with Billy, but I'm going to preface it a little bit before that. The whole point of the syringe exchange program is to keep people alive. It's something called a harm reduction practice, and that recognizes that people are going to use drugs, but you just try to keep them as safe as possible while they're doing that. So the program has been in Powell County for a handful of years now, and Billy was on staff when it started. So we asked him what his thoughts on the whole program, the syringe exchange program, was.
At first, I was a little skeptical of it. I was kind of like, that's kind of dumb. I don't want them to, waste my money on it and stuff. But even once you brought up this podcast, we was all in here talking the other day, and we have seen less syringes, popping up here and there, laying around the streets and stuff. And I think that alone is worth it because, it takes one kid getting those syringes. So I think people are doing a little better job. And those are hard to investigate. Most people are pretty, let's say, quiet or, careful about throwing them things down. They're not just walking around and tossing them like they would toss like some trash out the window of a car. They're hard to investigate, so it's almost impossible. Basically, we just come out, pick them up, and dispose of them in a sharps container. It's almost impossible to figure out who did it to begin with. So anything you can do to combat that, because you don't want, because obviously the diseases and stuff like that's also associated with drug addiction. You don't want, obviously a kid getting a hold of it or something. So I think the needles exchange stuff is a good thing. But I will admit, I was like most police officers, I was skeptical of it at first. I thought it was dumb that they were giving needles and stuff like that out, but they're going to get it anyway. So anything that we can do to to prevent them from, I guess, affecting the rest of us, throwing it down, sharing it, throwing it down, stuff like that. So.
And my favorite thing of everything that he said about the syringe exchange was that people are going to get needles anyways if they want them. There's a great quote out there floating on the internet somewhere of somebody saying that the syringe exchange is not responsible for allowing people to do drugs, because no one is going to decide to try using heroin because the health department was exchanging dirty syringes for clean ones. I don't think that would ever be the reason somebody would start using drugs. What it does do, however, is give people a reason to interact with the health department and give them a reason to come face to face with health professionals who can get them help. But anyways, moving on to another thing, this is kind of similar to the syringe exchange program. There's a law called the Good Samaritan Law, which says that if you are calling 911 to report an overdose, then you're going to be safe from legal charges. The law is in place to encourage people to call the EMS and call the police to come help revive somebody who would otherwise die from the overdose. So I asked Billy what his thoughts on that were.
I'm for the Good Samaritan Law. I like it. I like some of the content of it. I like that, people, are encouraged to call for help. But some of the stuff that we're seeing out there that I'd like to discourage people of is trusting in it. We're all trained on it. We're aware of it. We're not going to, I guess, show up and, do contrary to the laws. I mean, we follow the law the legislatures like to say it. But some things that I'm seeing, and I run across it several times in my career, is people will call, but then they'll take off. Take off and leave their buddy there. I mean, I've seen instances where they've even administered Narcan and left their buddy there. That's not something you want to do, especially to your buddies and stuff. And I'm sure they were just in fear of law enforcement coming. And one thing I'd like to talk about is trusting us. We're aware of the law. We've got good officers here here in Powell County. We're not going to show up and do anything contrary to it. So I just like to anybody that's listening, to ask them to trust us on that Good Samaritan law.
Yeah.
It's there for a reason, and we're going to honor it and show up and abide by it there. So that's an issue I've seen with it, is people just not trusting in it.
Yeah.
It's just that the general fear of law enforcement coming and people being in trouble and stuff like that. But generally, just running down an overdose scene, there's not a whole lot of enforcement that goes on at those, because most of the time, and you might find some paraphernalia or something like that, but we don't generally, and this varies from officer to officer on description, we don't generally charge, if we find a syringe or something on the scene of a overdose, we're going to take it and properly dispose of it and stuff like that anyways. But regardless, you shouldn't leave somebody there, overdosing and, struggling and fighting for their life.
Yeah.
Even if you Narcan them. Sometimes, as I do, one Narcan's not enough.
And this Narcan that he mentions is something that people use to stop an overdose. It's a medicine that's distributed out, and it reminds me of that scene in Pulp Fiction.
And it's not permanent. They still, somebody's to stay with them until the EMS gets there.
Looking through the Good Samaritan law that I've seen on it, the law reads at least that they're just trying to get people to care more about saving their friend's life more than being fearful of the law enforcement of it.
Yes.
So that's just, we care about lives more than.
Yeah. No. Yeah. And that agrees. And at the end of the day, we are law enforcement officers.
Mm-hmm.
We're held to a standard. We're going to enforce the law. There's going to be cases. If we show up and there's pounds of drugs laying there, then we're going to take action that we're allowed to take and get it off the street and hold them accountable. But one thing that we do, and this is kind of changing the subject, but we investigate cases of where it come from.
Okay.
So I won't get into the techniques we use. I don't think it's appropriate, because then I think that would hinder our ability. But we have technology, means, and willpower and manpower that if we show up, we're going to look into where it came from, and there's been several cases.
Where it came from, where the paraphernalia came from, or where the call came from?
No. Excuse me about that. We're the potent drugs, heroin, trafficking, stuff like that. Because anytime we can cut that off coming into our community, we're going to.
Yeah.
But we're going to try to figure out where it came from.
Yeah.
And I also encourage, if anybody out there that's listening is, help us out. We can't do it by ourselves. I mean, a lot of people don't like to tell on their buddies and stuff. But if it's bad enough, dope to take you down, somebody else could get out there and get a hold of it. So that's one thing. But we on overdoses, we're gonna, especially when there's a death involved, we're gonna follow up on it and take action on it. So that's one thing we're gonna do. We care more about that than we do about your syringe or your spoon laying there.
Yeah.
So we're getting ready to wrap up the episode. But if you've heard any of the stories that other people have told on this show, you would have heard before that the police department is oftentimes a catalyst for getting people into rehab. So I asked Billy a little bit about what that part of it's like, what it's like to try to get people on a long-term road to recovery, and what he sees that works or does not work.
And this may be controversial, and I'm not an expert on it. I'm just kind of what I'm seeing from the outside based on some of our involvement in it, is our judicial system as far as the amount. And I see their side of it, so just let me go ahead and say that. I see what they're trying to accomplish, but I almost feel like, a chance or two is okay, but some of these people getting multiple chances, and then that kind of sets a precedence that, who cares? They're just going to send me to rehab, or who cares? If I walk away from rehab and get picked up on a warrant, they're just going to send me right back. You may be able to, in my opinion, and again, I'm not a judicial expert on this, and I don't have any data. This is just something, a personal opinion, that they could maybe be a little tougher on them and make the consequence for leaving. If it's going to be involuntary to begin with, make the consequence a little tougher. That these people want to stay and want to give it a fair chance, because they need to give it. It's hard. I guess involuntary commitment's a little touchy and a little hard anyways. It does work. It gives people an opportunity to but they have to give it a chance. And if you don't stay, you're not giving it a chance. If you get sent, there's some instances where they've left right out of the jail parking lot and never even went to rehab and bench warrant on them instantly. If you make the punishment a little more severe for not following through with it, give them chances. I'm all for that. Give them chances. Like I said, you rehabilitate somebody, then that's you don't have to worry about saving them later on. So give them chances. I'm all for that. I'm not sitting here saying no rehab. I'm just saying for the people that are kind of abusing it as a system, make the punishment a little stiffer to where it may somebody may be more entitled to stay. Because they don't want to go, sit in jail for X amount of days or whatever. Kind of build up a, like a policy. Hey, if you don't do this, you're gonna be punished for it. And that way they'll at least stay and maybe give it a fair chance, and it may be a little more successful.
And that's one thing. I don't know many statistics about, like off the top of my head about this, but like one that I keep seeing come up is that involuntary treatment can be just as effective as voluntary treatment. So.
It can be. I think they need to do a little better job as far as, and I think Janelle Brewer does a great job with it in Spark. But they need to, because people take it the wrong way. The respondent on like the Casey's laws and stuff. Anytime we see that out there, on the streets talking to these people and dealing with them, they're mad about it. And that's common. They're aggravated that they're being sent to involuntary treatment. So, I don't have the answer for that. That's obviously not my expertise.
It's a
but
tough thing.
I can tell you that most of the people out there are mad about it. Maybe it could be marketed better, as a better thing, because people are kind of susceptible to not like authority to begin with, and anything involuntarily. It's just human nature to not like it. So maybe they can, but I'm for it. I'm for it. If you have a family member, somebody you care about, go get a Casey's law on them. Even if it doesn't work, what's the harm in trying it? At least you tried.
Yeah.
And if it saves one life, then that's good enough.
Well, that's all the time that we have today. Thank you guys for tuning in and listening to our conversation. Billy Rice, thank you so much for taking the time to join in. This was actually the first episode of the show that we recorded. So thankfully, Billy was courageous enough to come on and try something new out with me. So keep in mind that we're not claiming to have the answers to everything or anything at all, really. But Billy does have that really unique lived experience, so it's worth listening to him. I would also like to thank WSKV for broadcasting the show for us, and to the health department for letting there be a show in the first place. This is The Local Lens. These are our people using our voices, telling our stories, because no one sees it like we do.